they update and mention what the latest version of the repository is. It's recommended that you stay on the latest version, but you should at least be on top of the minimum standard. So there's specific rules. And when you get to inspection, they expect you to have at least version 5.5 or version 6.0. So you should make sure that you're on the latest version. There's essentially two main ways to download the code. You can download it as a zip file and load it up, which is easy, but it does make it, but today I'm gonna explain how to clone this repository, because this allows you to make changes and then allows you to use some of the features of GitHub so that you can upload your code and you can synchronize it across multiple devices. So to do that, you have to go over to here and click fork. And this creates a copy of the repository. So here it says it's been forked from the FTC Tech Challenge, and this is my username, and it's been copied into my code. And this allows you to synchronize your changes across with the upstream main robot controller app. So whenever they make changes, and the first team continuously makes changes every couple of weeks, and they release updates with new details and enhancements. And every year they also add updates for the current season. So updating TensorFlow or Vuforia, or in general fixing bugs. So it's recommended that you stay on the latest version. So to copy the code, you have to grab the URL, and then you can go to the Android Studio, and I already have the code loaded up, but I'm going to explain how to do it from the beginning. You can use get from version control, which will allow you to copy that code down from GitHub. So you can sign into GitHub, or you could just directly paste in the URL. It might ask you to download Git, you might need to download Git for Windows or Git for Mac, depending on what OS you're using it on. But that is a local software that allows you to synchronize your, it's essentially a downloader for GitHub, and it allows you to keep track of your project locally and synchronize it with the upstream GitHub. And you have to choose which folder to synchronize it into, and it should allow me to clone it. If it doesn't, I already have the project set up, so you just click clone, but I already downloaded, so I'm just going to jump right into it. The actual project itself has many files, but most of them aren't directly relevant. There's GitHub files, build files that Android Studio automatically creates, a couple of backup libraries. Most of this stuff isn't.
1 second, Karthik. We just got a question from Francis. So yeah, it's basically a skinned IntelliJ. Yeah.
Yeah, IntelliJ and Android Studio are very similar. They're almost identical. You can use either one, and the way to set it up and the way to use it is pretty much very identical. So I'm gonna go over into Android view, which is the default view. So the main folder we're looking at here is called team code. There's a folder called FTC Robot Controller that has all of FTC's code. You're probably not going to have to deal with that, but that's where their application lies for the FTC Robot Controller. The one that we're going to be using is called team code. Inside there's a folder called Java, and these folders are all set up automatically. But here I created a very simple teleop. There's nothing in here right now, but when you create, you can right click on this folder and click new Java class and type in the name of whatever op mode autonomous or teleop you're creating. And it will create a file called here, for example, sample teleop. I'm gonna go into a little bit more technical details. So I'm gonna set up an example teleop for that. Oh, and I also wanted to point out that inside the FTC Robot Controller application, if you go inside here, there's a folder called externals.samples, and they have a lot of useful things you can look at. for example, if you're trying to figure out like how to use a specific sensor, or for even like how to get sound to run on the robot controller, they have like detailed code that goes through it, so you can copy it and look at it, and they have like comments explaining how each part of that aspect works. There's a lot of examples. Like if you wanted a op mode, there's a very basic explanation of how to make a tank drive op mode. So the code's there if you need to like look back at it and reference it. And that's in the FTC robot controller folder, and which is separate from the team code folder that we're working in. So this is the basic structure of a teleop. I'm setting this up for two reasons. One, I'm going to go into the explanation of like a little bit later how to set up a mecanum drive and some of the more technical details that, so I'm setting up the teleop for that. And I also wanted to show like once you create some code, how to synchronize it to GitHub. So here's a very basic op mode that has been created. And in order to, for example, if you wanted to share this with your teammates or even create a personal backup of this code, what you have to do is go into VCS, Git, and then commit file. This will allow you to locally save the file. When you commit a file in Git, it allows you to save the file. So what we're doing right now is after we created all the code, we're going to save it to our local commit history, which is a list of changes that we made on our personal device. So I can say, add a message that says like explaining what I did today. So created sample teleop. So this explains, this is just a little message. So I know like what happened on that day and what we did. Commit that file, and that will save to our local history the fact that I worked on this, and it'll be marked in a local history. In order to then synchronize that, here on this online website, you can see that the code is, this is, it hasn't been uploaded in here yet. So the team code, I believe there is no sample teleop op mode yet. So in order to push this code changes that I made right now, I can run git push, and then this will allow me to push this code that I'm working on right now into the main FTC repository online. So this will synchronize all the local changes I made, creating this sample teleop, and it will push it online so that then when you look online, you can find your code, and anybody else that's working on the same FTC repository can then clone that code or synchronize that code to their local folder. And so there's a lot of Git and GitHub are very powerful tools, and there's many like more advanced features that you could look into. Like you can create, for example, branches is a very powerful Git and GitHub technology. So you can create a separate like version tree essentially of, for example, if you're working on a different mechanism, you could have a branch for like the shooter mechanism and try out different changes to a specific part of the code. So you could just change some of the shooter mechanisms, test out code, work on that, and then merge it back to your main competition code later. So GitHub allows you to like make powerful changes and use branches and stuff. But the most basic commands are git commit, which will save the changes you made locally, git push, which will push those codes to the upper online GitHub repository, and then git pull, which will, if someone else makes edits to the repository, you can use the git pull method to pull their changes to your local file. So if you just hit pull, right now there's no changes up there, so it's not going to synchronize anything. But if someone else were to make changes to this repository other than me, I could use git pull to pull that code to my own local computer.
And one thing I'll add here, another reason why GitHub is so useful is because of its version control. So whenever you push and commit something to GitHub, it's storing that state of your code as one version of your code. So if you look at what Karthik is showing, there's like a commit history that shows all the changes that you've made at that commit. So over time, when you accumulate tens and hundreds of commits over the season, you'll just see a very long log of all the commits. And where this becomes useful is, especially in robotics programming, is when you have an error in your code. So for example, in competition, there's a lot of times when we'll try to implement a last minute feature or do something stupid and the code will break. And instead of, sort of panicking and trying to undo or look at, file histories, local histories on the IDE itself, you can very nicely just go back to the last commit that worked using GitHub. So in that sense, version control is super important and super helpful. So in a more practical sense also. So yeah.
Do you think we should go into the next section, what is it, the Mechanim bot?
Yeah, I mean, do you guys have any questions at this point about GitHub or using Android Studio? Anything relevant to that?
Probably a basic question, but is it available on Chromebook, Android Studio?
I think that this was actually really helpful.
I believe there's I don't think it's completely out of beta. I'm not sure, but there is a way to install. I believe Google does support Android Studio for some Chromebooks. I might have to look into that, but there is a version of Android Studio that is meant for Chromebooks, but it is a little specific to what kind of Chromebook you have.
Okay, thanks. I'll play around with it later. Appreciate it.